And then before I know it, I'm on a Zoom with this dude who's sat in Costa Rica in a vest.
Hello, it's Paul McFadden here, and I'm with Paul Rawson and Steve Hand, my partners at Express Mortgages. Now, what we've planned to do, and we've been thinking about doing this for quite some time, is put together a podcast. And that podcast is to help everyone when it comes to all things finance, all things dealing with mortgages, investing, development. We're going to go into so much to help people understand the whole process, but more importantly, to have a conversation around finance, because there's lots going on in the market, lots of things that influence lending, different criteria, and the more that we can do this to help you guys with various case studies and discussing types of finance and funding, especially these guys who have got such a wealth of experience and knowledge in all things finance. So before we get into that, I want to share a little bit about our partnership and how it all came about. So most people are aware that I have an education company, and I've been involved in property myself for quite some time. And through that education company, I first met Steve. So Steve came along to one of our programs, our Property Protege program. And as he came along, and he came there to, get educated more about property, which in itself is quite interesting, isn't it? Because even though he's got a wealth of knowledge in the world of property and finance, he still wants to educate himself, still wants to learn more. So coming along, and I got to meet him, and I found out about his company, Express Mortgages. And the best part about this is that I just stood afar watching to see what would happen inside the group. And in that protege community, I saw more and more people reaching out to Express to organise their mortgages. And then I started to hear about how good they were. Because I've had previous experience dealing with various different brokers, and we'll get into that a little bit more through this. And it was just great to hear, and it was refreshing that how well Steve and Paul and the team at Express were dealing with our clients. I thought, yeah, I really would love to be involved in a mortgage brokerage, because I've got a lot of value to bring. I've got a lot of clients as well. And then I approached that conversation with Steve. Now, I hadn't yet met Paul, right? And we'll get into a little bit of the story there. And then Steve was like, yeah, that sounds great, but we might have a little bit of a challenge. So let me speak to my business partner, Paul. And then those guys got together, and we'll talk about that little bit of the story in a moment, because I think it's quite interesting. And then fast forward through a process of understanding, realising, we could work together. And here's the thing for me. I was looking for three main things in a mortgage brokerage. One, I wanted credibility. And Express are almost 2 decades, aren't they? So it's that 17 or 18 years you guys have been running?
2004.
2004. So old school, right? They've been in this game for a long period of time. So I wanted to see that credibility. I wanted to see that longevity. I wanted to see a mortgage brokerage that had access to the whole of the market. And that's rare as well. You can hear brokers say they've got the whole market, but do they really? And with these guys here, they've got different forms of lending, different forms of, again, there's so many different forms of lending. And when you start to work with a great brokerage, you're going to see how much more options are available for you. So that was important. 2, I wanted first-class customer service, because you're dealing with clients, aren't you? And that's incredibly important. And Express, that's a big focus of theirs. They want to give that first-class service. And more importantly, just a broker that can get things done, that are going to be proactive. And that's Express all over. So for me, it's an absolute privilege to be working with these guys here, especially a company that's been around for almost 2 decades. So before we get into more about having a conversation about all things finance, let's tell a little bit of a story for when I reached out and I said, look, I'd be interested in being involved. So there was a bit of a backstory, was there not?
Yeah, unfortunately. So shall I tell it from my point of view, because you had to do the brave thing and come to me, or do you want to?
You can roll with it. I like to hear your side of it.
So we had a previous business partner, and things didn't go as well as what we wanted to, let's just put it that way. And it ended up in quite a deep legal exit of that gentleman. And we just about got through that after a long period of time of it being not just rough, but then the legal battle as well. We're talking years. Just about got a clean break. And then Steve said to me, I think we should go into business with Paul McFadden. And I looked at, and I'd never met you, to be fair, yeah. And I looked at him, I went, are you fucking serious?
I think those were your words as well.
They were. And I'll be honest, I was always a bit cynical about property educators as well, because you hear the horror stories of what
Yeah.
people pay fortunes and they get, in my opinion, nothing or even worse, a bad education, which is worse than no education. And so I was a bit like, so he wants me to get in business with this dude up in Scotland. I've never met him, and he's a property educator, and we've just been through a legal battle. And it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, would you, Steve? And I thought, do you know what? He'd been through that with me, obviously, and I thought, he's got to feel something to even have almost the bollocks, if you like, to come to a business partner and say, see all that headache we've just had for the past 3-4 years? Let's put our necks on the block again. Yeah. And then before I know it, I'm on a Zoom with this dude who's sat in Costa Rica in a vest and having a chat. But you start to get a feel for people, don't you? And I could see you were quite a driven guy, and obviously the synergies were without question. And I suppose what also helped was we'd dealt with some of your clients who had been educated, and I thought, do you know what? Actually, the education you guys give is a quality one, because I could tell in the people that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And therefore, you've got good clients with longevity about them, and I think it was Ian Briley who eventually said, well, it's a bit of a marriage made in heaven. You've got these clients who were struggling to find all what you've just explained. And obviously we were ambitious to take the business on upwards to the next level. So fair play to him, for...
Well done,
It's not just a pretty
well
face.
Done. So why don't you guys give us a bit more of your own background as well? Because of course you guys have got a lot of experience in here, but maybe take us through that journey. Because this is our first podcast of many, so it'd be good to just give a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, so I started in mortgages 2000, and I was introduced to Paul. He was the manager of the office in Liverpool for the guy that we were working for, a company called The Mortgage Point. And I walked in there for an interview that day, and we're sporting a black eye because I'd been playing rugby, honest, not been in a fight. And the owner said to me, this is Paul. He manages the Liverpool office. And I think he could tell I was quite coin-operated, because he said to me, yeah, Paul lives down at the docks. He drives a new BMW, and he was trying to sell all the benefits to the job to me. But I wanted to be in mortgages anyway. I've always, since being a little boy, I've always loved property. And I do love finance as well, the mathematical side, so that the two kind of go together well. And started there. We worked there. Paul had already been with the firm about a year and a half, I think. 2 years? 3 years, wow.
You did 4, didn't you?
Yeah, when I first met you, how long had you been at the Mortgage Point?
3 years, and I did 7 when we left, and you'd done 4. So
4, yeah.
see that mathematics that you saw going on.
So were you working for Paul?
Effectively, yeah. He was my boss for a period of time. Fortunately, only for about 6 or 9 months, because actually no, for longer, because Paul then moved on to area manager status, and an opportunity came up in, first of all, the Leeds office, and then the Birmingham office. But I looked at the Leeds proposition and thought, it doesn't really feel worthwhile moving from my current situation to be a manager. You do the maths and you think, I'm actually, in my pocket, I'm not going to be any better off. So I waited, and then the Birmingham one came up, and I'm really glad I took that role. That was to manage the Birmingham office, which was doing the second worst in the company. And Paul, you had 4 offices, didn't you? 4 or 5, one side of the country.
4, yeah.
And Neil, the other area manager, had another 4. And you had some quite poor performing branches, didn't you, in the outset? But we managed
Can we
to...
just clarify on that? I inherited poor performing branches.
Yeah.
I didn't create poor performing branches.
No.
Yeah.
You got the shitty end of the stick, didn't you?
I did the 3 worst out of the whole company, and then 1 out of the top 4.
1 out of the top 4. But when we left, we both left at a similar time, didn't we, to set up Express Mortgages in the... opened the doors September 2004. So I'd done a couple of years or so in Birmingham, 2.5 years there, and left Birmingham, and it was the second best in the company then. There was only Nottingham ahead of us, which was in Neil's patch, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we were getting very close to them and possibly would have overtaken them at that time. So part of that was because we're both driven guys anyway, but when you're a driven person and then you've got somebody that's also driven on your back, then it just produces the results that's required. And that was a really good grounding for setting up our own business, because you had to graft, didn't you? You know, it was open 7 days a week. It was open till 8 p.m. at night at the office. So yeah, it's really good, a good grounding for what lay ahead. And then we set up Express Mortgages, and that was our ethos: first-class customer service, and being experts at what we do. And that way, we believe we could stand out in the marketplace, and we've carried that through to this day, haven't we? And we've really tried to embed that into the staff that, you know, if you want to stand out from your competition, you've got to give. In a world where a lot of people are numbers, you know, you've got to make your customers stand out. You've got to give them a first-class service. You make it stand out, sorry, give your customer that first-class service and be really good at what you do. You know, whether it's buy-to-let, whether it's development finance, you're dealing with expats or international clients, you know, you've got to make it your mission to educate yourself and be as good as you can be. So, yeah, hopefully we pass that on to the staff, don't we? And then that carries through in the company ethos.
Love it. Good stuff. So very similar, but you'd started slightly earlier in your journey?
Yeah, I came out of university having studied accountancy, and one thing I learned in 3 years of doing accountancy, apart from how to do accounts, was I didn't want to be an accountant, but a decent qualification, and went into general financial advice and learnt a lot there for about a year before then concentrating on mortgages at the Mortgage Point, and very quickly went from being an advisor to branch manager. And yeah, I think actually I was branch manager only for a couple of weeks when you started, and then I got moved to area manager.
Wow, was it?
Yeah, it wasn't very long at all.
Must have been punishing for me then, because it felt like months.
So, yeah, he's lovely, isn't he? Yeah, inherited these branches, which we won't want to go over too much, but Birmingham was always the one that puzzled me a bit, because I'd gone in there and been like in residence, if you like, for a couple of weeks. Now, it's the second biggest city in the country, yeah, and it's all radio advertising, so it's picking up a lot of chimney pots. And it just wasn't firing. But when I was in there for a couple of weeks, and I was in a hotel and I was running it myself, it went from doing a couple of deals a week to 13 or 14. So it was like the owner said, I always knew it wasn't the place and the advertising, it was the people that were in it. And there was a couple of people that we needed to get out of there because they preferred the pub at dinner than being at the desk or whatever. And tried a couple of managers and that. And then Stuart Hall Mortgage Point, he said to me, what's your advice on this? And I said, get him in there. I said, you just need someone who's focused and driven to see it through, not just do it for a month or 2 months. And I think the telling thing was, Steve, you actually moved down there as well, didn't you? You didn't try and do it on a distance or living in a hotel. You fully committed yourself.
Yeah.
And then, you know, take nothing away from him, because many had failed before him. Got a branch up there to number 2 in the country, and I think he's right in what he said. Given a bit longer, had we not left and set up Express, it would have got there to number 1.
Yeah.
Of course, it always takes a great area manager behind you to help you get there. He'll put me down as an ogre, but honestly, I'm a cuddly teddy bear, really.
So you guys set up Express 2004?
Correct. Yeah.
And that's kind of around about the time where buy-to-lets were really becoming a thing in terms of that type of finance. And then, as we all know, come 2008, we had, you know, the recession, and it was the, you know, subprime mortgages, Northern Rock, 120% loan to values. It was just crazy. It was just a very volatile time, especially when the market started to correct. It was a credit crunch. Can you explain a little bit more about what happened through that whole process? Because as a broker, it must have been incredibly challenging. That was when I was just getting started in my property journey, like pre-2008.
Yeah, you know, look back and I think we were really fortunate in some respects. We set up with no clients. You wouldn't. I know some people would take clients from where they worked previously. You wouldn't do that with our old boss, but we didn't. We wouldn't have done that anyway. I don't think that was our sort of ethos. And so we opened the doors, which was in the High Street in Wigan Town Centre. We got some footfall business. We got some radio advertising business as well, didn't we? some from the Yellow Pages back then, different sort of ways of attracting clients. And fortunately, within those first 3 years before the queues outside of Northern Rock happened, we'd built up a decent business there where, you know, we were already hiring a member of staff, weren't we? In fact, 2. We had another advisor and we had an administrator. And if it wasn't for working really hard and being so diligent those first few years, I think we'd have had to close the doors a year into that crisis, because the client bank that we had, we did get a lot of referrals from people, a lot of existing clients coming back to us. There was a lot of introduced business to us because we had a decent name in the town, and that carried us through those sort of 2 or 3 troublesome years in the Great Recession. So, and also we've always believed this. We've never really pigeonholed ourselves in one area. So we've not chosen to do just adverse credit or just self-cert mortgages or just buy-to-let. We've sort of covered all bases, haven't we? And I think that carried us through a lot, especially when I think back to 2009 and 10, where there was dual pricing going on, where lenders would offer better rates than through a broker. And in the buy-to-let world, I think there was 2 lenders left, wasn't there, at one point?
Birmingham Midshares and BM Solutions and TMW.
TMW. And what was really frustrating was we were getting the calls, we were getting the inquiries coming in. We just didn't have a product to give them at the end of it. Because
See, just on that, I just want to bring this up because when I first got started in property, it was the BM days, and Mortgage Works were introduced later on down the line. And I remember with BM, just as I was getting started, speaking to a broker, you can get 9 mortgages with the BM Solutions, or was it HBOS Group, the partner of, is it?
Correct.
And then they changed their criteria to only allowing 3. So then for me, I was like, okay, well, how can I get 3? Then you need to get your partner 3, then you need to get a business partner. It was crazy jumping around.
Yeah.
And the Mortgage Works came in play, but they were quite challenging. And I just relate this back to nowadays. Fast forward 2023, there is just so many more lenders. It's crazy. And I think that especially when you've now got lenders who lend to limited companies and everything else as well, and different criterias. So you must have seen a lot from what happened in 2008 and the criteria starting to change, and then starting to see that starting to have more lenders coming into the marketplace.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's so much easier these days, isn't it? Because, like you say, Paul, you can go to one lender, you can fill your boots up with 10 buy-to-lets. Once you've hit that number, go to somebody else. Even if you're with the likes of TSB that previously only allowed 3 buy-to-lets, fine, just go elsewhere. And some lenders don't have a limit. Yeah. Some lenders don't stress like your portfolio in the background to the same degree that other lenders will. So there's so much choice out there and an option to grow a portfolio these days.
Yeah, for sure. And from your experience as well, Paul, so what have you seen over the last kind of main changes over the last maybe since 2008 until now?
Well, obviously the regulation's a lot harder for lenders and brokers, and in some ways quite right, because throwing money at people without checking their income and things, and going back to brokers who struggled, they chased the self-cert adverse because they could charge them big fees and that, but when it all collapsed, that's what took a lot of brokers down. But we had quite a loyal client bank. It travelled from the south coast to the north coast, and just by word of mouth. And with that, we got a bigger spread. And what we realised was that that's always been our strength, as Steve alludes to. But you can't just rely on your residential ones. So, a lot more assessment of incomes. Deposit levels have had to be higher, generally speaking, although we've just had the 100% mortgage back, haven't we? Which is interesting. I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but that's another conversation. And in buy-to-let, it's just this explosion of not just how many lenders we can deal with now, but the different way that they'll come up with products, facilitating the limited companies. That was almost confined to a couple of lenders but when all the rules changed, a lot of lenders have then adopted and said, we're going to do it, because TMW never did it. They won't touch a limited company mortgage, but they're all over it now because that's what the market has dictated. And fair play to lenders many times over the years. They do quite quickly adapt and develop products because, at the end of the day, they have to. They've got to lend money. The whole banking system survives on people depositing money and them lending money out. And I know there's funding lines and wholesale funds are behind all that, but if you don't lend money as a bank, you're absolutely screwed. So it was interesting because I think one thing that stuck out for me around that time, again, just looking at the buy-to-let, we used to have a sourcing system, and the products are either on your screen, the black type, or black ink as I call it, or blue ink, yeah. And if it was in blue, only brokers could get their hands on that product. And we were trying to chase remortgage business around the credit crunch because no one was buying houses, yeah? Mm-hmm. And dual pricing, as Steve alludes to, that was in there, which is a bit of a sore point, but that's up to the lenders, I suppose. And we were just doing a load of work, and then, you know what it's like with the internet, people go, hold on a minute, if I go to the lender direct, it's the fees a few £100 less, or...
Do you know what's crazy about you just saying there? This is how crazy it is and why people should use a broker. Because they just make this assumption that they could walk into a high street bank and it might be the worst option that they're going to be taking, because that bank can only offer their own products, and other banks potentially could offer different products. And this is why with a broker, and I guess where value as a broker is understanding someone's personal circumstance and situation, and then going to the market, and it might be with that broker, it might be with that lender, but you've got to explore the other options as well. And I guess if you just go to one high street bank, they're only going to offer their own product.
Absolutely. And the whole dual pricing thing at the time, it kind of skewed people's belief of brokers, because it kind of gave the impression that, yeah, that's the way it is, so we'll all just go direct. Yeah. But what no one was saying was that actually there's still a whole heap of products that only brokers could get their hands on, and even lenders that only brokers can deal with, not just in the buy-to-let world, in residential land as well. So it gave the false impression of where the market was at. And if you look at lending today, 3/4 at least of lending goes through brokers. And why is that? Well, we problem solve for those people who need it, but we instantly assess thousands of products with some very clever software, and I think it takes about 2 weeks to get an appointment at a bank. So by the time you've gone through maybe 5 or 6 of them, the whole market's changed anyway.
Yeah.
And I know we're biased because we're brokers, but the fact of the matter is, in seconds, we assess the whole damn market and find people the best deal for their circumstances. You just can't do that as a member of the public. Even if you're very clever and it's a straightforward application, you still don't get to see the products that we get.
Yeah.
So brokers are always going to have the upper hand.
Yeah. So with most people, I would assume that are going to be watching and listening to this podcast will be investors, a high percentage at least. And I'm going to share my own personal experience, right, with dealing with brokers as a new investor when I get started in property at the age of 19. And if anyone's heard my story, I was able to get my first buy-to-let mortgage in my own name, and my first residential home in my own name. And then I'd messed up my credit with a few other things that then made it difficult for me to get access to lending. So I chose to go down the route of joint venture with other people who could get mortgages. But let me just share my first experience. So because my first home wasn't my own home to live in, it was a buy-to-let mortgage. Like I was scared when I was talking to the broker, because I had this idea they're going to quiz me, they're going to try and catch me out, they're going to ask me questions if I make a mistake, and so that was my experience. And I share that because I hear also others who are getting started in property, and they're like, well, should I speak to my broker? And how do I know what kind of access of funding can I get? What about if I've got, it's a lot of what ifs. And what I try and encourage them to do, and I'll get your point too as well, is that, well, at least speak to the broker, share your current circumstances, situation, share a little bit about your strategy, and that strategy may change, but at least initially, and then a good broker is going to be able to guide you down the right path in terms of what lending options are available, and more importantly, where your focus should be. Mm-hmm. So just to touch on that a little bit of a client journey, someone who's maybe just starting out, or someone who's an experienced investor, but they've just done it normally traditional ways, and they're maybe looking for more creative when it comes to bridging or development finance, and maybe not even knowing where to start. I always say it all starts with getting a phone call. And what is the broker's intent in terms of asking all the questions and what they're trying to achieve for you as a client too?
So first of all, any decent broker is there to help, not judge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we ever had anyone who was judging our clients in our place and saying, I look at a lot of stats to make sure that that's never happened. It's very easy. I just look at lender spread. How many lenders are we using as a company, and how many lenders is each broker using? Because the bigger the spread, the better the job they're doing. It's as simple as that. And we used over 50 lenders last year. There's brokers out there who only have panels of 8 to 12. We used over 50. And that's just the residential market, not even the bridge and development. So the biggest thing I would say is whether it be a first-time buyer, first-time landlord, or someone's coming to us for bridging and development, no matter what it is, please just tell us the whole scenario, because people think, I won't tell them about that missed payment. We're going to find out, yeah? Or when you say you're on 50,000, but really you're on 30,000 plus 20 grand commission, no matter how much we'll ask that in that manner, people will still try and say, well, if I just tell them, we're going to get you pay slips, So we're on your side, and the more we know, and as in everything, the better job we can do from the first time buyer to when we're putting together a few £1 million worth of development finance. It's so important. And that would be where I would start as a client. But more than anything, we're human. Don't think we're coming back to your initial fear, is this broker here to judge me? We're not. We're human beings. We get up in the morning, we have our breakfast, we go to work, we have a little bit of a laugh, and we like to find clients, especially where you do the professional thing, but you do it with them, not for them, and you get people. We've been invited to weddings and christenings of our clients, because you get to that level of connection, and for me that's when it's really, really good. Yeah. So be open, be honest, and we'll help you out.
Yeah, I see that inside the project community as well, the relationships that are formed and the site visits that you do with a lot of them as well, because strengthening that relationship, isn't it? Which is always important.
Definitely, yeah, massively. And the more that you can connect in that way, clients will open up more. You'll have a greater bond together. You'll do more business together as well. You'll get more referrals. You'll grow your company that way, which is really important, isn't it? It's a really solid foundation to have.
Yeah. So what about investors who are in a similar situation like I was back in the day? So I was able to get my first buy-to-let, my first residential mortgage, and then I found it difficult to access your traditional lenders. It's a bit different nowadays, but back then the main ones I wouldn't qualify. Mm-hmm. So what I did qualify though was for bridging finance, higher rates, but again, the way I looked at it is that I was still able to do more deals. Mm-hmm. You get a little bit more creative as well when it comes to that. So I think we should definitely do a podcast on that alone, but just touch on that a little bit, because I dare say there'll be some people that are in a similar situation with myself when I started out, going, well, as soon as I start asking for affordability, as soon as I start as in my income and my credit, well, there's no point in me making a call, but there is solutions.
Oh, massive, yeah. And that was probably a blessing in disguise, because it allowed you to be more creative from day one, didn't it? Whereas you might have gone down a traditional route and not done some of the deals that you did do when you started out.
Yeah, I found a lot of people with bridging finance start grumbling about the costs. Mm-hmm. The way I looked at it is, I don't have any other fucking option. I'm in partnership with a JV company. I'm JVing with the bridger. That's how I changed my mindset to it and realised, okay, more costs, but if I'm putting less money down, or they're going to give me a percentage of the lending that I need, then jackpot, I can do it.
Brilliant, yeah. And it allows you to go for properties that maybe a mortgage couldn't be approved on, like failed EPCs, or auction purchases, things like that, or where you've got to do a heavy refurb to it. So, no, I think when people have got the challenge of, say, they've just gone self-employed, or they've got very little income, and they think no one's going to lend me the money because my affordability is crap on paper, there's usually a way around it, and not all lenders look at things in the same way. Yeah. So, there's lenders out there, they're not bothered at all what your income is, not bothered when it's an investment property, and they're looking at the strength of that project or that property, and they'll lend based on that. So I would just say to people, put your ego down, give us a call, let's have a chat. we'll probably find you a solution. There's very few people we can't help.
Yeah. And one more point I want to touch on before we wrap episode number 1 up, because I get this so often, and that is, if I set up a limited company today, this week, how on earth am I going to get lending for it? It's a new company. It doesn't have any trading history. I mean, nobody's going to give us access to money.
You can set it up today and get a mortgage today.
Well,
You
there
can
you
go off
go.
today.
And why is that? I mean, obviously I know, but I'm just to get the broker's take.
It's knowing which rocks to look under, isn't it? That's for me one of our major strengths, because the vast majority of people out there are either a bridging and development broker, or they're a resi, or a resi and buy-to-let maybe, or they're a second charge broker. And if a client really wants that kind of coverage, because this is how you really unlock finance, it's a combination of all those things a lot of the time. But if you're having to deal with 3 and 4 different brokers, different companies, it's so hard to coordinate. Whereas our team sit there, we have a team who specialise in each area within the company, and they're often working together to unlock all what you're on about. So yeah, you open that, Steve just said, open that company today, the money will be there within a period of time, depending on what finance it is. You know, allowing for solicitors, who take forever, but
Yeah.
it's crazy to think back that when because I'm the old one, aren't I? When I started off in mortgages, you couldn't really get more than 3 times your income. That was it.
Yeah.
And now, you know, we're putting deals together where people are literally putting no money in and developing. And this whole bridging thing, it is funny because it's always, it's expensive, but it's incredible the amount of people that finally find the courage to go into it when they've had, you know, some apprehension. But then they realise, God, look what that allowed me to do. Look at the money I've earned out of that deal. And then they can't get enough of it, can they?
Oh, no.
They get hooked on it. So
Yeah.
it's brilliant. First time buyers all the way up to your property developer. You get you do get a buzz out of obviously having a successful business. I'm not going to hide from that's what we're after. But seeing people move on in life, the first house, the first buy-to-let, the first development, it's incredible, really.
Yeah, it's massive. You think you can picture some of your clients, can't you? And when they started off and they had like one property that you dealt with, and now there's one guy now in particular that's got 40 odd. There's the story that we tell, a lady that we know, of course, that bought 49 in one go, in one transaction, because of the creative finance that we were able to put together. So, I would just say to people, just reach out, have a chat. You don't know what's possible until you've had that chat.
Yeah.
We're still learning, aren't we? The market
Yep.
keeps changing. We have to keep up to pace with criteria and how it unlocks things. And I think this sums it up. If I was dealing with me now, as opposed to me in 2005 and 6 when I was setting up my portfolio, I'd be a whole lot wealthier than what I am now. And don't get me wrong, I'm not looking for the violin strings. I'm cool. The kids are getting fed this week. It's not a problem, yeah. But I'd have done it in a whole different manner. But that's life, isn't it? Yeah. It's about what you know at what moment in time.
One of the things I always say is that you don't know what you don't know, and that becomes a challenge when you're looking at the world of finance and things are evolving and changing almost on a weekly basis. And I can't stress enough the importance of having part of your power team a great mortgage broker, not a good broker. There's many good brokers out there. I'm talking about a great broker that can give you that first-class service, that can look at your options and provide solutions, who can work alongside you to help you. And this is what I'm grateful for, especially when it comes to the things that I'm working on, is that the amount of times I'm bouncing off you guys and having a chat and different structure, you know, so it's always important to have those people by your side as well. So this has been fun in terms of our first episode. There's definitely topics that we've discussed here that we're going to go into a lot more depth and detail on as well. Our goal for this is to, of course, educate, help, and show you guys that this whole world of finance is a lot easier to understand, and that you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to brokers, but more importantly, to just help you guys with different case studies we're going to talk about and break down some deals as well. And I think that through that learning process, it will start to show you how much more options you've got available when it comes to the world of finance. And if you can then start doing things a bit more intelligently when it comes to building your property portfolio, being a property developer, then it's going to make more money for you guys too. So this has been fun. Great first episode.
Thanks, Paul. It's been great.
No.
Nice one.